ton of work. A lot of work's gone into this up to this point. Still a little bit of work to do. Still some I's are dotted, some T's across. But we're about there. But want to give a shout out and appreciation to everybody that's been involved in this process so far. Questions?
Said it's always about the right guy, and you'll pay the price for the right guy. We've seen you move up from 32 to 12. We've seen you move up from 28 to whatever it was last year. I'm curious, when you look at things and you kind of assess the right guys in the board, like how far, what kind of assets do you have? How far are you willing to move up to get that right guy in this draft if it plays out that way?
Yeah, it's always it's really case by case, year to year. You know, when we did the big one with Jameson, you know, that was the right, you know, that was the guy, and you know so that was a little bit more probably pre-planned, obviously because it was such a massive jump. It took a lot more conversation, discussions, and planning to get in position to get him. But even the one, you know, last year, that was more, I think I told you guys, that was more unexpected. Just didn't even think that we would get in a position to be in striking range. And, you know, we had a lot of affinity for TA. And when we got in striking range, which you know, we felt was reasonable, then that's when we made the move. So it just depends, you know, who might be in striking range, who might, you know. So it could be moving back. It could just be, you know, just staying patient. It could be, didn't think that this guy, didn't go up. So, you know, you prepare for everything. So you go through all those scenarios, and then you just kind of got to be ready for anything.
Trading up, double the amount that back. Is there anything about your philosophy that I think lends itself to trading up instead of trading back?
Yeah, I think it's kind of probably based on like just what the overall let's call it what the talent level is and how high the talent level is in each draft, and it's also relative to where we're picking. So I don't really go into it as like, man, I gotta trade up. But you know, trading back is just, you know, how many of those players would be available, and you know, how much less of a player could you be getting, or the players are going to be the same, and it looks like the more rational thing to get more assets. So, but it's case by case. Yeah.
You guys are in a completely different situation than you were before, roster-wise, you know, asset-wise. But I don't imagine your philosophy has changed very much. Can you just share the biggest lesson maybe you've learned over the last 4 years and how that helps guide you?
You know, probably a little bit about, you know, what he just asked about, just kind of just staying patient. You know, I think the first couple of years, you know, there was probably a little bit more because of where we were at as a roster. You know, was like, man, like we need this, like I told you guys, I think at the time we needed everything. So there was not a position or anything that was like, we just needed really good football players. And so it was much more urgent. We have a lot of really good football players, but I don't think that where we are at a roster now is going to lessen my desire either to want to go get more better football players. But, you know, obviously the more depth that you build, and when the roster is harder to make, you know, sometimes it does say, look, maybe just stay patient. You know, just see, or maybe just go up and get, you know, the guy you really, really want, and you don't use all those other draft picks, you know. So, but yeah, just kind of seeing the big picture, you know, in terms of not being as anxious because of where we're as a roster.
Being at 28 is very giving you options to move up, stay, or move down. But have you taken interesting or intriguing calls from other teams interested in that spot?
I have not.
Since 2021, since you first got here, you drafted 6 guys who's going on to become Pro Bowlers. That's the most in the span, you know, in the league. How much pride do you take in that, especially after some of those picks was non-traditional, where you saw a little criticism from people outside, but how much pride do you take in that, knowing you've got 6 Pro Bowlers that you actually drafted, and just kind of the
Yeah, I mean, look. First of all, it's not just us acquiring the player. It takes everybody. So we can identify the talent, but we have great coaches that, like I've said often, can accelerate development and get the most out of these players. So I think it's more. I take pride in this that we have the right people in our building. Just from a football leadership perspective, and we're all working as one. We're all on the same page. We pretty much see things the same, and we know where we want to get. So I take more pride in that, of just having the right people, because it is a process. It is a lot of work that's involved, and it's a lot of detail, and it's a lot that doesn't get out, to the public, that, it takes everybody. So I'm the most proud of who we have in our building and who we're working with on a regular basis, because it really doesn't happen if you don't have everyone.
Players that were project players, like Mano that you knew were probably
Yeah.
play last year. Going into this year and being so close to where you guys want to go, do you look more toward ready to hit the ground running players now, or do you just keep your same philosophy? I'm just going to take good players, and whenever they develop into playing, they'll be ready.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. It's got to be the right project. It got to be the right developmental upside guy that might not be ready to go. Because there's a ton of them in every draft, and Manu was just one of those guys that was was really appealing, and we had a lot of love for it in the process, and kind of just we were in position to take him. But look. Derek Barnes was developmental when we took him, and, was kind of still learning how to play the linebacker position and all that kind of stuff. So it all goes back down to the right intangibles and who we feel is a good football player. But, I totally understand. It's just that I think in the past, we didn't really, like when we first started, in 21, we didn't have as much talent on the roster at the time, and all those young guys had to play. And then we were fortunate enough to have all those additional picks after the golf trade that, and I thought that we made good use of those picks where those guys were really, really good players that were like immediate impact. So we don't really go into it like, man, we got to get like high floor ready to go, but the ceiling might be a little bit lower, or, we're just going to take just developmental guys. It's just, there's no problem taking a developmental guy. Again, like I said, some of these guys, man, you could take a late round pick and, it's got to be the right guy or it's going to be hard to make the roster.
When you have the 20th pick, and let's just say there's a handful of players you think might be there that you'd like, and now you're getting close to me on the clock and they're still there, is trading down an attractive thing because we're going to get one of the guys we were hoping to get and we can pick up additional assets?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the compensation is right and it's reasonable and it makes sense, and like I said before, if we have the pool of players, we have kind of relatively in the same bucket, then yeah, absolutely, that could be an option.
This kind of ties into that, but because you talk a lot about when we were in Florida, kind of the future, right? In terms of like planning ahead for that stuff. Is it more important now to hit on guys that can be cheap for a while? You know what I mean? To make sure that you have that financial flexibility, or to get other guys that will be in the pipeline that you can, do the same thing with, I guess.
So say that again. You said, is it more important to get guys that?
I guess it's the quantity versus quality sort of debate. When
Yeah.
it comes to you don't have as many open roster spots, so it sort of ties in with that, acquiring the extra picks. How do you manage that where, you're more likely to hit on a couple guys if you get five versus that trading up and we get the one guy that
Yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying, and the way that I kind of view it is, let's take care of the main thing first, and just see if we can get just the best football players for us first, and then we'll deal with what we have to do later. But I'd rather have a surplus of good football players that we really, really like, and increase great problems to have. And that might increase great problems to have, but I'd rather have those great problems instead of not having a great problem to have.
Darius Smith recently at the Pistons game. Just wondering, since the annual meeting, have you had any more conversations with his agent or the player?
No, we haven't had any discussions since then. And, I think we kind of left it as, that, his agent would kind of let us know if something was, going on or, if anything's had changed or if we had any updates. So, but no, we haven't had any discussions since the annual meetings.
What Dave was talking about, I'm just curious about the BPA versus need conversation when maybe a guy is.
I love need.
Let's say
you guys know me.
Is clearly a guy you evaluated very, very highly, but there's an overlap with a guy in your roster where it's tough to see how you get both of them on the field. Like, how do you handle that as an evaluator when that guy's the best player but maybe can't help you in a meaningful way?
Yeah, and we've had those discussions. I think the interesting thing, Justin, is that, and this is where I not get annoyed, but this is why I sometimes don't understand the whole need thing, because when each season ends, it's going to be something else. Like, another player's contract's going to end. Another player, unfortunately, might be coming off an injury. And, it's going to be something different every single offseason. So if you're trying to chase what happened last season of, oh, man, this guy's contract's and if you're trying to chase, well, this guy got an injury, you're just kind of getting into a cycle that I think is a little bit dangerous to get into. So that's why I've been more of a, just get the best player, because even, look, we loved Rakestraw, and unfortunately he just wasn't as healthy, but so he wasn't able to help as much last year. But, we're real excited and looking forward to what he's going to be able to bring this year. So there is just, and I said before, there's just a level of patience that you just have to play. But when you start chasing need, it's well, that need might make sense for right now at this time. But what we make these picks for future investments. And I know we live in a society that everything is right now, boom, right now. And I understand it too, just from, when a player gets drafted and so much, fascination is made about the draft, and, people are excited about it. People want to see it right now. And, they don't want to wait and be patient, but there's just patience. I mean, it's no different than when we made that massive jump to get Jamison Williams. He was coming off his injury. We knew maybe he could play a little bit late in the season, but weren't planning on it. So yeah, I just got to play the patient. But I'm just, I think you can get trouble chasing needs sometimes, and then you're dependent on a rookie that you do the best you can, but nobody has a crystal ball. So it could be a tough world to live in.
Perfect timing for your 50th question about pass rushers then. What do you make of the class overall, and is there a player or group of players within this class, or maybe early in the favorites, that would make you celebrate if you were to land somebody like that in that draft room?
Yeah, I think it's some good players, at that position. I won't get into specifics or details of the actual players, but, I know some will go before our pick, some might be available at our pick, and, just like previous questions I fielded, it might be opportunity to trade back, and then that position is there. But, yeah, there's some good football players there. Same as I felt when I told you guys at the owners' meetings.
Dan says he loves the receiver room, but would like to add some youth and competition. Are you guys in alignment on that?
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's kind of like, we talk about corner, you really can't never have enough of them. And, obviously receiver, look, now the only thing about receiver is that I always felt like receiver is probably one of the more voluminous positions in each draft. So it's probably more of those guys, even like veteran free agents that are available after the draft as well. But yeah, I mean, just to add one, just continue to add youth, You know, we're happy with the guys that we have, very happy with the guys we have. But obviously, you know, it'd be great to get younger.
When you make trades, whether it's trading up or trading down, you guys still use the draft chart that everybody has? Is that antiquated, or is that pretty accurate with the point value of Jimmy Johnson draft?
Yeah, I think everybody. Well, I don't want to speak for everybody. I would think most people have a chart. We have a chart, but I do think it's probably more of your philosophy of how you use the chart. Is that, you know, I've spoken with teams, you know, during the draft, and they're like, the minuscule point is off, and it's like, come on, man, give me a break. And, you know, but that's their philosophy, where we're kind of like, it's in the range, you know, and this is the player that we want, this is the deal we want to do, and then we do it. So if everybody has them, there's multiple charts that exist as well, but I just think what your philosophy is in terms of the usage of it.
We're trying to figure out what you will do. What will you not do?
Why is it so, like, let me ask you this, because, and I'm going to ask you a question. Well, let me get your question out the way. What I won't do is what I've been saying that I won't do, that I know you guys get frustrated with me not doing, is looking at our depth charts, like names, black and white names, but no football being played or anything, looking at a depth charts and seeing a position and then saying, man, you got to get that position, but a player has to play that position. And so that's why I've always been saying, look, we want to get good players, because if you get a guy that can play a position and say, look, like, what was the question that you asked, Brad? The 50th time you asked pass rushers, like, you know, well, you can draft a pass rusher every round. You could. It's easy. That's just like if a coach told me, man, we want a guy that's 6'4", 250. If we got a guy 6'4", 250, that's easy. You want a guy 6'4", 250? Yeah. I don't know if he's a good football player, but he'll be 6'4", 250. Where the same as, yeah, you can draft a defensive end. If the player playing defensive end is not what we feel is going to be the right guy to really contribute to our football team, then what are you guys going to write about that player? You guys, man, that's not working. So we're not going to reach on players just to fill a position. So that's what we won't do. But it's just, you said, like, you're always trying to figure out what we're going to do. I don't, like, when, like, a movie comes out, right? Like, I don't understand. When you go to see a movie, you don't know what you've never seen the movie. That's the excitement. And so you're fine just watching the movie. And it is, whether the movie's good or bad, and then you can do that. But I don't understand why people can't just watch the draft. And it's like, all right, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but watch the draft and get your popcorn ready and enjoy it. You know what I mean?
A question about the challenges of the scouting process, and I'm going to frame it around a specific player. I know you're not a big fan of that, but it's just one of the ways to work here. But Mike Green's got some, you know, very serious accusations in his past that have amounted to nothing through this point. And so, you know, what goes into your staff's process in the appearance of impropriety? Like, how do you go and you get comfortable with a prospect that, you know, maybe has some smoke and, you know, not necessarily fire?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a lot more in depth and a lot harder than some people may think. And I do think it's case by case. Like, I in terms of character evaluation, I wish it was as easy as seeing a headline. Like, if that was that, it was that, and that was, but there's so much more depth and detail and research that's involved. It's literally, you know, I tell our scouts, you know, in terms of character, it's year round. It's a house you got to build year round. And, you know, it leads all the way up till the draft, really. So, yeah, but I do think, I've always said it's case by case. Like, everything that you may read may not be what actually happened, and that's the actual details of it, or whatever the case is. But, you know, that's just it's case by case, but it's a lot of depth. It's a lot of research. You know, I don't want to get into specifics too much in terms of our process, but it goes so much further than, you know, what's available, you know, in the news. Yep.
You guys, there are a couple teams that don't do top 30 visits anymore, including
Yep.
your old place. You guys still do them. I don't know if you use all 30, but like, can you explain the value of them in that regard for you? Like, what do you get out of them? Why are they still an important part of your process?
Yeah, no, and you know, look, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that Les, you know, goes that route. You know, back when I was there, we were doing them, but just knowing Les, I'm not surprised that he, you know, doesn't do them anymore. But I do think you still get some value there, in terms of, yeah, it gets put out in the media and it's like, oh, well, you brought this player, but those players are brought in for so many different reasons. It's, you know, it could be just the makeup. It could be, you know, how well they retain football. You know, it could be just the personality, how well they're going to fit in the locker room, because there are human beings, man. And, you know, there's human beings that you're going to have to work with. So it goes past just, you know, what their job is on the football on the football field. And so, and then it's human beings that you have to really invest in, and they're really young kids, you know, that may need some growing up or development here or there. So they come from all different backgrounds. So it's another opportunity to kind of just dig deeper into the human being besides just the 15 minutes at the combine. But obviously our scouts, you know, that's what I feel great about, is that our scouts do such a great job with that stuff, is that, you know, by the time we get to the combine, you know, it's pretty much, we kind of know what it is, but it's good to feel it too.
I'm sure you're going to love this because you've already shot down all the pass rusher need, all the but when you're so close, when you work so hard to get here, filled a lot of needs, you built the roster, you have a lot of depth. But when it looks so clear that you finished last year with a definite need at the pass rushing, you know, because of injuries and all that, and as you said, you never know what's going to happen, what the need's going to be in the future.
Is it more so because of Aiden got hurt? Is that why this is such a big thing?
And
Okay.
you seem to have, you know, a reliable, you know, second option, and you made the trade. Obviously, you did what you could.
Yep.
In this case, people are going to be screaming for edge rush help, and those guys are really hard to get, the really good ones.
Yeah.
Is this, I hate to say that, you know, one player away, that kind of stuff, but, I mean, you look like you might have been one player away. Does that change at all as far as what you're willing to do, how far you're willing to go to get one of those premium guys?
Yeah, again, it has to be the right guy. And, you know, even if it was like, you know, it was the right guy at that specific position that we really wanted. Just because you might want it doesn't mean that you can get up there and get them. You know, there's been previous years where, you know, I know we did the Jameson Williams trade that was pretty far up there from where we were at. That hasn't been the only year that we've attempted to do that, not at that specific position, but just for a player. And it takes two people to do a trade. And, you know, if there's some teams that, you know, just don't want to go that far back. And so it takes two. So it's hard to say, like, you know, man, like, we should do this. And even if we wanted to, there's no telling that the other team's willing to go back. You said what?